Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Channel. Tonight, we're turning toward one of the most powerful forces our planet can unleash: tidal waves. Though the name sounds familiar, the reality is stranger, larger, and far more astonishing than most people ever realize. These are not ordinary waves rolling in from a storm. They are vast surges of ocean set in motion by earthquakes, collapsing volcanoes, and sudden shifts in the seafloor, carrying immense power across entire seas. In this journey, we'll move into a world where the ocean can race faster than a jet, where coastlines can be reshaped in minutes, and where the sea itself can seem to vanish before returning with overwhelming force. We'll explore how whole harbors can trap and twist this energy, how ancient communities learned to read the signs, and how the planet can send a wall of water across an entire ocean basin. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. Let your body soften and allow your eyes to grow heavy. And let your mind unwind as we explore this fascinating world. Let's begin. One deep earthquake can shove an entire ocean. Far below the surface, where tectonic plates grind and lock together for centuries, pressure can build until the seafloor suddenly lurches. When that happens beneath the ocean, the water above is forced upward or downward in an instant. The sea cannot simply ignore that movement. Gravity immediately tries to restore balance, and the disturbance begins racing outward in all directions. What is extraordinary is the scale. This is not a splash. It is the transfer of immense geological force into the water above. A rupture along a subduction zone can stretch for hundreds of miles, which means a vast area of ocean is set in motion at once. That is why one event in the deep can send danger across whole basins. The earthquake itself may last only minutes, yet the water it displaces can travel for hours and strike shores far from the original rupture. It is Earth's crust and ocean acting as one connected system. Tsunamis can cross the Pacific in a day. That sounds almost impossible until you remember how differently these waves behave in the open ocean. Their energy is spread through enormous depth, which allows them to move with astonishing speed across vast distances. A tsunami generated near one side of the Pacific can reach faraway coastlines many hours later, carrying the fingerprint of an event that happened thousands of miles away. This means a disaster can begin in one nation and become a threat to many others before the day is over. It also means the ocean preserves motion with remarkable efficiency. The wave train loses some energy as it travels, but not enough to make distant shores safe by default. Historic events have shown how communities with no local earthquake at all can still face severe flooding, destructive currents, and deadly surges. The Pacific feels immense to us, yet to a tsunami it can become a highway, broad, deep, and shockingly fast. The first warning can be the sea vanishing. One of the strangest and most dangerous sights before impact is a shoreline that suddenly empties. Water may pull back far beyond its normal edge, exposing rocks, reefs, harbor floors, and flopping fish where the sea should be. To anyone who does not understand what it means, the scene can look fascinating rather than fatal. People have walked out onto newly exposed sand, taken photographs, and moved closer just when they needed to run. This retreat happens because the trough of the wave reaches shore before the crest, drawing water seaward with surprising speed. It can transform a familiar beach into an eerie, temporary landscape that seems to invite curiosity. In reality, it is often a final warning written in giant letters across the coast. The ocean is not disappearing peacefully. It is gathering itself. When it returns, the water may come back with crushing force, carrying debris, wreckage, and almost no time to escape. In deep water, a tsunami can outrun a jet. Out in the open ocean, these waves are often low in height and easy to miss, but their speed can be extraordinary. Because it depends heavily on water depth, a tsunami moving across very deep sea can race along at hundreds of miles per hour. That is fast enough to rival the cruising speed of a passenger aircraft, which feels absurd until you realize the wave is not just a surface wrinkle. It is a pulse of energy moving through the whole water column. Ships far offshore may pass above it and notice almost nothing more than a broad, gentle rise. That contrast is one of the most astonishing things about the phenomenon. A wave can be nearly invisible in deep water, yet be tearing across an ocean basin with immense momentum. Only when it reaches shallower coastal seas does it begin to slow, bunch up, and reveal the violence it has been carrying all along. A tsunami is not one wave, but many. People often speak as though the danger comes in a single dramatic arrival, then ends. In reality, the sea usually comes in a sequence. A tsunami is more like a train of surges than one solitary blow, and each arrival can differ in height, force, and timing. The interval between them may be minutes, or much longer than frightened survivors expect. That is what makes the aftermath so deceptive. After the first rush withdraws, the shoreline can look survivable again. Some people go back for possessions. Others return to help, to film, or simply to stare. Then another surge arrives, sometimes larger than the first. This pattern happened because the original disturbance sets multiple long waves in motion, and the coastline, seabed, and reflections from nearby features can rearrange them in complicated ways. The ocean does not deliver its power in one neat act. It arrives in chapters, and the later ones can be the deadliest. Some tidal waves begin with collapsing mountains underwater. Not every tsunami starts with a giant earthquake. Sometimes the trigger is a massive landslide beneath the sea, when unstable sediment or rock suddenly gives way and plunges downslope. In that moment, water is displaced with explosive force. The results can be devastating, especially near the source, because landslide-generated tsunamis can rise quickly and strike nearby coasts with very little warning. Entire underwater slopes can fail after an earthquake shakes them loose, or after volcanoes build steep, fragile flanks that eventually collapse into the sea. In places like island arcs and fjords, these events can be especially dangerous because the geography helps concentrate the water. What makes this so gripping is the hidden drama of the seabed itself. Beneath apparently calm water, there may be cliffs, sediment piles, and volcanic structures waiting for instability. The ocean surface can look serene, while underwater landscapes are poised for sudden collapse on an enormous scale. The deadliest tsunamis have erased whole coastlines in hours. When the worst events strike, destruction can unfold with horrifying speed. Fishing towns, roads, farms, ports, and neighborhoods can be swallowed in a single afternoon, leaving coastlines unrecognizable before the day is done. What makes these disasters so overwhelming is not just the water itself, but the way it turns everything into weapons. Boats become battering rams. Cars become debris. Buildings fracture, splinter, and join the flow. In some historic catastrophes, waves swept across several countries around the same ocean basin, killing on a scale that stunned the world. Entire communities were stripped from the map so completely that survivors later struggled to point out where streets and homes had been. That is part of what gives tsunamis their haunting place in human memory. They do not merely flood. They can remove the familiar shape of a coast and replace it with mud, wreckage, silence, and a landscape that feels suddenly foreign. The ocean can stay dangerous long after first landfall. The moment of impact is only the beginning. After the initial surge, the sea may continue to race in and out for hours, dragging wreckage, reversing currents, and turning harbors, river mouths, and coastal channels into violent traps. Water that seems to be retreating can suddenly accelerate around buildings, pull people off their feet, or sweep heavy debris back toward shore. In ports, the danger is often especially severe because confined spaces can magnify fast currents and make the water churn unpredictably. Rescue efforts become difficult, not just because of damage on land, but because the shoreline itself stays unstable. Even experienced observers can misjudge when it is safe. That lingering threat is one of the hardest lessons people learn. The event does not end when the first surge stops rising. The ocean remains unsettled, and every return flow can carry fresh force. Survival often depends on staying away much longer than instinct suggests. Tsunamis carry energy through the whole water column. Ordinary surf mostly disturbs the upper layer of the sea. A tsunami behaves very differently. Its motion reaches from the surface all the way down to the seabed, which means the entire depth of the ocean is involved in carrying the disturbance forward. That is one reason these waves can contain such astonishing power, even when they look modest in deep water. Imagine the difference between flicking the top of a blanket and yanking the entire blanket across a bed. One is a surface ripple. The other moves everything. Because so much water is in motion, the energy can travel immense distances without fading the way wind-driven chop does. This also explains why the wave transforms so dramatically near land. As the water shallows, all that movement has to reorganize itself. The result can be a sudden rise that feels out of proportion to what existed offshore. The power was always there. The coastline simply reveals it. Wind waves stir the surface, but tsunamis move the sea. Most waves we know are born from air. Wind brushes the water, pushes it, and gradually builds ripples into swells. Their energy is concentrated near the surface, which is why a stormy sea can look fierce, while deeper water stays relatively undisturbed. A tsunami comes from below, not above. It begins when the ocean is displaced by the solid earth or by a huge mass of rock, ice, or volcanic material entering the water. That difference in origin changes everything about how the wave behaves. A windy ocean can be messy, steep, and loud. A tsunami can be smoother, longer, and far more deceptive. Storm waves crash one after another and mostly concern the shoreline they reach. A tsunami carries a deeper, broader pulse that can cross entire ocean basins. So although both are called waves, they are cousins, at most. One is weather playing on the sea. The other is the sea itself being moved. In open ocean, a tsunami may pass unnoticed below ships. This is one of the strangest contrasts in all of ocean science. The same event that can devastate a coast may barely trouble a vessel far offshore. In deep water, a tsunami often has a very long wavelength and a relatively small height, sometimes only a gentle rise and fall spread across many miles. A ship riding above it may lift so gradually that the motion feels unremarkable, especially against the normal restlessness of the sea. There is no towering wall out there, no dramatic breaker racing toward the bow. The danger hides in scale rather than appearance. The wave is broad, fast, and filled with energy, but its shape in deep water can be too subtle for human senses to recognize. This has led to eerie situations in which crews at sea knew nothing unusual had passed beneath them, while destruction was already unfolding on distant shores. The ocean can conceal extraordinary force beneath an almost ordinary surface. A wave only grows monstrous when shallow water slows it. As a tsunami approaches land, it enters a zone where the seabed begins to interfere with its motion. The front of the wave feels the bottom first, and friction slows it down. but the energy behind it is still arriving, still pushing forward, and with less room to spread through deep water, that energy begins to pile upward. This is the moment when an unremarkable offshore pulse can become something terrifying. Speed is exchanged for height. The wavelength shortens. The sea thickens, steepens, and gathers itself into a surge that can overwhelm everything in its path. It is a transformation driven by geometry and gravity, yet it feels almost theatrical, as though the ocean reveals its true form only at the last moment. What looked small in the deep becomes immense at the coast because the wave is being compressed by the rising seafloor. Land does not create the danger. It unlocks its visible shape. The shoreline can focus a tsunami like a lens. Not all coasts receive the same blow, even during the same event. The shape of the shoreline can bend, channel, and concentrate wave energy in ways that make one place far more vulnerable than another nearby. Headlands, submarine ridges, offshore islands, and curving bays can all alter the path of incoming waves. In some cases, the coastline acts almost like glass shaping light, steering water into a narrower path and intensifying the force at a particular point. This is why damage maps from major tsunamis can look so uneven. One stretch of coast may be badly flooded, while another escapes with much less harm. The difference is not luck alone. It is often the hidden architecture of the land and seabed working on the wave before it arrives. That idea makes every coastline more fascinating. A shore is not just where sea meets land. It is a complex instrument that can amplify or soften the power approaching from offshore. One bay can amplify water, while another nearby stays calmer. Two neighboring bays can face the same tsunami and experience very different outcomes. The reason often lies in shape, depth, and orientation. A broad bay with the wrong geometry may allow the incoming wave to spread and lose some force, while a narrower or more steeply shaped bay can concentrate the water and send it rushing higher inland. The angle at which the wave arrives matters too. If the opening of a bay lines up with the incoming energy, the water may be guided inward more efficiently, almost as if the coast were welcoming it. In other places, the incoming wave meets a less favorable entrance and loses some of its organization before it reaches shore. This is why local knowledge matters so much in tsunami science. Coastlines are not interchangeable. Every bay has its own personality, written in rock and depth, and that personality can decide whether the sea arrives as a dangerous surge or a catastrophe. A narrow inlet can turn one surge into many. When a long wave is forced into a confined passage, strange things begin to happen. Water that might have arrived as one broad movement in the open can become broken, reflected, and reorganized by the walls of the inlet and the shape of the bottom. The surge may rebound from one side, interact with incoming water, and create a sequence of separate pulses that feel like repeated attacks. To someone on shore, it can seem as though the ocean keeps changing its mind, rushing in, drawing back, then surging again from a different direction. In narrow channels, speed can increase dramatically as the same volume of water is forced through less space. That makes the flow more violent and less predictable. Places that look sheltered on a map can therefore become unexpectedly dangerous. A confined inlet does not simply receive a tsunami. It reshapes it, sometimes turning a single long disturbance into a prolonged series of destructive movements. Harbors sometimes trap tsunami energy and make it spin. Harbors can become some of the most chaotic places during a tsunami, not always because the water rises highest there, but because the motion becomes confused and violent inside enclosed spaces. Once the wave enters a harbor, it can reflect off seawalls, piers, and basin edges, crossing its own path again and again. Currents may reverse suddenly. Water may whirl around moored boats and slam them into docks. In some harbors, the oscillation can continue long after the initial arrival, as though the basin is ringing like a struck bell. This trapped motion can create rotating flows and surges that tear apart port infrastructure even when nearby beaches appear less dramatic. Mooring lines snap. Vessels collide. Floating debris becomes a hazard in every direction. For coastal communities, this is a chilling reminder that harbors are not simply shelters from ocean danger. Under the wrong conditions, the very structures built for safety can help trap and multiply destructive motion. The first wave is not always the largest. This is one of the most dangerous truths for anyone near the coast. The first arrival may be strong, but it is not always the peak of the event. Later waves can build higher because of the way the tsunami was generated, the timing between individual wave crests, and the way local coastlines reshape each arrival. Sometimes the ocean seems to offer a false ending. People see water receding, hear shouting ease, and begin to believe the worst has passed. Then a larger surge appears, faster or deeper than the one before it. In some disasters, the most destructive wave has arrived well after the first impact, catching returning survivors and responders in a second crisis. That pattern gives tsunamis a cruel unpredictability. They do not always announce their maximum force at the beginning. Instead, danger can escalate in stages. The sea may test the shore once, then return with something even more devastating after people have already relaxed. Some tsunamis arrive as a fast, rising flood. Not every tsunami announces itself with a dramatic breaker or towering front. In many places, the water simply begins to rise with unnatural speed, as though the sea has decided to pour inland without bothering to form a classic wave shape. Streets become channels. Cars begin to float. Water pushes through doorways and around buildings with frightening persistence. Because it looks at first like flooding rather than surf, some people underestimate what is happening. But this kind of arrival can be just as deadly. A rapidly rising flow has enormous force behind it, and even knee-deep water moving quickly can knock people down and carry debris with destructive power. In low-lying coastal towns, this type of surge can feel especially uncanny because the sea seems to advance everywhere at once. There is no single crest to watch. The whole shoreline becomes a moving boundary. The danger is not in a crashing form. It is in relentless, accelerating occupation. Others strike as a sudden breaking wall of water. Sometimes the sea does arrive in the form people fear most, a steep, breaking front that crashes forward with terrifying speed. In those moments, the shoreline can seem to vanish behind a moving barrier of foam, wreckage, and dark water. This kind of impact is especially frightening because it feels immediate and violent in a way that leaves almost no room for doubt. Witnesses have described hearing a roar before seeing the water, like heavy machinery or an approaching train. Then the front appears, already tearing apart buildings, snapping trees, and carrying boats where streets used to be. The breaking face may not last long, but its force can be extraordinary because it combines height, momentum, and debris in one concentrated blow. What makes this image so haunting is that it turns the ocean into something that looks almost deliberate. For a few terrible moments, the sea seems to stand up and charge the land. A major undersea quake can lift the seafloor in minutes. Beneath the ocean, two great slabs of crust can remain locked together for centuries, while strain builds in silence. Then, in a matter of minutes, a fault ruptures, and a section of seafloor is thrust upward by several feet or even more across a vast area. That sudden lift is enough to heave the water above it out of balance and begin a tsunami. It is difficult to imagine the scale involved. This is not a small patch of seabed buckling. In the largest events, the rupture can extend for hundreds of miles, reshaping the ocean floor over an area larger than many countries. Instruments on land record violent shaking, while out at sea, the water above the uplift begins its long outward journey. The quake may be brief in human terms, yet the change it creates in the seafloor can alter coastlines, deform islands, and launch a chain of consequences that continues long after the ground stops moving. When the seafloor drops, the ocean falls with it. Not every tsunami begins with water being pushed upward. In some parts of a rupturing fault, the seabed suddenly drops, and the water above follows it downward. That downward displacement matters just as much, because the ocean immediately tries to recover from the imbalance. Gravity pulls surrounding water inward and upward, creating a spreading disturbance that can become part of a powerful tsunami. This hidden descent helps explain why the sea can retreat so strangely before some arrivals. The ocean is responding to a sudden change in the shape of the basin beneath it. What fascinates scientists is that one earthquake can produce both uplift and subsidence across different parts of the fault, with each section contributing to the overall wave pattern in its own way. The sea is not simply shoved in one direction. It is deformed. The surface becomes a moving record of what the crust below has just done, written across the water in motion and imbalance. Subduction zones are Earth's great engines of tsunamis. The most powerful tsunami factories on Earth lie where one tectonic plate dives beneath another. These places are called subduction zones, and they are among the most dramatic structures on the planet. Over time, the descending plate drags against the one above it, storing enormous strain. When that locked boundary finally slips, the overlying plate can spring upward or downward across a huge region of seafloor. That is why these zones are so dangerous. They are capable of producing the giant earthquakes most closely linked with ocean-wide tsunamis. The trenches they form may be miles deep, yet the real danger is the invisible fault interface beneath them, where pressure accumulates for generations before release. Some of the most devastating coastal disasters in recorded history began in these settings. To understand tsunami risk on a global scale, you have to understand subduction zones, because they are where the slow machinery of plate tectonics most often turns suddenly into moving water. Tidal waves are usually not tides at all. The name misleads almost everyone at first, because tides are the slow breathing of the sea, guided mainly by the moon and sun over many hours. What people usually mean here is a tsunami, which begins when a huge mass of water is displaced all at once. That can happen after a great undersea earthquake, a collapsing volcano, or a massive landslide. A tide rises predictably. A tsunami arrives because the ocean has been struck. That difference matters because the wrong name can make the danger sound familiar when it is anything but. For centuries, people used tidal wave because they saw the sea surge far inland and assumed the tides had gone wild. In truth, the mechanism is entirely different. Once you know that, the whole subject becomes more astonishing because you are no longer thinking about ordinary water levels. You are thinking about the sudden motion of an entire ocean. The sea can rise as a moving wall. Many people imagine a giant surfing wave with a curling crest, but that picture is often wrong. Near shore, the water may instead arrive as a steep surge, a fast-rising flood, or a dark wall advancing with terrifying certainty. In some places, it looks less like a wave than a whole section of sea lifting and pushing inland. That is one reason it is so dangerous. People waiting for a dramatic breaker may not realize what they are seeing until the water is already racing through streets, ports, and fields. Eyewitnesses have described horizons that seem to swell upward, boats suddenly tilting at impossible angles, and coastlines disappearing beneath a moving front of debris and foam. The shape depends on the seabed, the coast, and the wave itself. That unpredictability makes the spectacle even more unnerving. The ocean does not need to curl beautifully to be catastrophic. It only needs to keep coming. The Ring of Fire produces many of history's biggest tsunamis. Encircling much of the Pacific is a vast belt of subduction zones, volcanoes, and earthquake faults known as the Ring of Fire. It is not a perfect ring, but it forms one of the most restless regions on Earth. Along its edges, plates dive, grind, rupture, and build explosive volcanoes, creating the conditions for many of the world's most destructive tsunamis. Coasts in Japan, Alaska, Chile, Indonesia, and other Pacific regions all sit near this immense zone of instability. That means the ocean basin most famous for its size is also lined by some of the most powerful tsunami sources known. The phrase Ring of Fire sounds dramatic, but it is also wonderfully precise because it captures both the fiery volcanism and the deep tectonic unrest that define these margins. When people speak of tsunami-prone shores, they are often speaking about communities that live along this colossal geological circle, where the planet's crust is constantly being remade. Japan's coast has shaped tsunami science for centuries. Few places have contributed more to human understanding of tsunamis than Japan. Its long, densely populated coastline faces one of the most active tectonic settings on Earth, which means communities there have lived with repeated tsunami danger for generations. Over centuries, this produced not only painful experience, but also observation, memory, and eventually advanced science. Japanese records helped preserve detailed accounts of past events, including wave heights, inundation distances, and patterns of destruction that later researchers could compare with geology and instruments. Coastal communities learned to recognize warning signs. Scholars studied arrival times and shoreline behavior. Modern Japan went on to build some of the most sophisticated warning systems, hazard maps, evacuation plans, and sea defenses in the world. In many ways, tsunami science grew from a long conversation between suffering and careful attention. The coast taught its lessons harshly, but those lessons shaped how the modern world now studies, models, and responds to these extraordinary waves. The word tsunami means harbor wave in Japanese. The term itself tells a story. In Japanese, tsu means harbor, and nami means wave. That name is revealing, because harbors are exactly where these waves can behave in especially striking ways. A tsunami that seems unimpressive offshore may become suddenly obvious inside a harbor, where confined water, reflections, and strong currents expose its force. Fishermen historically returned from calm, deeper water to find devastation in the harbor itself, which helped give the phenomenon its memorable name. The word does not literally describe the cause of the wave, but the place where people most vividly experienced its effect. Over time, that Japanese term became the global scientific standard because it was more accurate than tidal wave and more faithful to how the event was understood in a society with long experience of it. It is remarkable that one of the world's most important disaster words began as a practical description of where danger revealed itself most clearly. Ancient stone markers in Japan warned villages never build below them. Along parts of Japan's coast, there are old stone markers set on hillsides and overlooking valleys, carved with blunt messages from the past. Some warn descendants not to build homes below that point. Others record that earlier communities survived only because they fled to higher ground. These stones are extraordinary because they are not abstract memorials. They are instructions, placed where future generations would see them and remember what the sea had done before. In a landscape where written records could be lost and memory could fade, stone offered endurance. It could outlast storms, wars, and ordinary forgetfulness. What makes these markers so powerful is their tone. They speak across centuries with practical urgency rather than poetry. The message is simple. The water came here once, and it can come again. In that sense, the stones are part geology, part history, and part conversation between the dead and the living about where safety truly lies. Some communities forgot old tsunami wisdom, then paid dearly. Human memory is short compared with geological time. That is one reason tsunami risk can grow quietly during long gaps between disasters. A coastline that has been calm for decades may begin to feel safe. New roads appear. Houses spread lower down the slope. Old stories begin to sound exaggerated or too distant to matter. Even warnings carved in stone can become background scenery when generations pass without a major event. Then the sea returns, and forgotten wisdom suddenly becomes devastatingly relevant again. This pattern has repeated in many places, where communities that once understood the reach of past waves slowly drifted back into harm's way. The tragedy is not only the loss itself, but the recognition that the knowledge was already there. It had simply faded from daily life. Tsunami history is full of these painful reminders that survival depends not just on science or engineering, but on keeping memory alive across generations that may never witness danger until it arrives. Indigenous stories preserved tsunami memories long before modern instruments existed. Long before seismometers, tide gauges, and satellite data, many coastal peoples preserved the memory of great waves through oral tradition. These stories were not merely legends for entertainment. In many cases, they carried practical memory about where the sea had reached, what signs came first, and which places offered safety. Among indigenous communities around the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere, stories of shaking ground, sudden flooding, and coastal transformation have later been compared with geological evidence and found to align with CAS. Real, ancient events. That is one of the most fascinating things about tsunami history. Human memory can survive in forms that science once overlooked. A story passed down beside a fire may preserve clues that match buried sand layers, drowned forests, and fault records centuries later. Oral tradition can act like a cultural seismograph, storing disaster knowledge across generations. In that way, storytelling itself became a survival tool, carrying warnings far beyond the lifespan of any single witness. Oral history can outlast official records by centuries. Paper burns, archives flood, governments fall, and yet a spoken warning can survive if a community keeps repeating it. That is one of the most remarkable things about tsunami memory. In some coastal cultures, stories about the sea were passed from elders to children for generations, not as decoration, but as instructions for survival. A tale might describe ground shaking, strange water, and the climb to safety. It might name a hill, a ridge, or a line in the forest where people once survived. Later, scientists have sometimes compared these stories with sediment layers, drowned forests, and fault records, and found striking agreement. That is astonishing, because it means memory can travel across centuries without ink or stone. A spoken warning can move through time inside families, ceremonies, and place names. In a sense, oral history becomes a living instrument, carried by human voices, preserving what the sea once did long after official records have vanished. The Lisbon disaster changed Europe's ideas about nature and risk. On All Saints' Day in 1755, Lisbon was struck by a catastrophic earthquake, then by tsunami waves that swept into the harbor and riverfront, turning a great city into a scene of fire, collapse, flooding. The shock traveled far beyond Portugal. Across Europe, people tried to understand how a prosperous capital filled with churches on a holy day could be destroyed so suddenly. The disaster forced a change in thought. It became not only a religious and philosophical crisis, but also a scientific one. Observers began collecting reports, comparing timings and asking whether earthquakes and sea waves might follow patterns rather than pure mystery. In that sense, Lisbon helped push Europe toward a more modern understanding of natural hazards. The event was terrible, but it also reshaped how people thought about cities, coastlines, and vulnerability. Risk was no longer only fate. It became something that might be studied, mapped, and prepared for. Krakatoa sent tsunami waves racing across the Sunda Strait. In 1883, the volcanic island of Krakatoa erupted with such violence that the explosion was heard thousands of miles away. But the blast was only part of the catastrophe. As the volcano collapsed, enormous masses of rock and ash plunged into the surrounding sea, generating tsunami waves that tore across the Sunda Strait and smashed into nearby coasts. Entire settlements were destroyed in a very short time. Ships were lifted inland. Shorelines were stripped and remade. The darkness, the ashfall, and the roaring sea must have made the event feel almost apocalyptic to those caught near it. Krakatoa matters in tsunami history because it showed that volcanoes can be just as deadly as earthquakes when they destabilize large bodies of water. It was not simply fire meeting sea. It was a collapsing mountain rearranging the ocean in minutes. Few events illustrate more vividly how different natural forces can combine into one overwhelming coastal disaster. The Indian Ocean disaster awakened global tsunami warning systems. Before 2004, the Indian Ocean had no warning network on the scale already developed in the Pacific. Then a colossal undersea earthquake off Sumatra generated a tsunami that struck coast after coast across multiple nations, killing on a horrifying scale. One of the most haunting facts about that disaster is that many places had hours before impact, yet lacked the systems needed to detect the threat, issue alerts, and move people to safety. In the aftermath, the world changed course. Nations invested in deep ocean sensors, communication networks, seismic monitoring, public education, and coordinated warning centers for the Indian Ocean and beyond. The tragedy exposed a painful truth. Detection alone is not enough. Information must move quickly, clearly, and in forms communities can act on. What followed was one of the most significant global hazard response efforts in modern history. A terrible event became the catalyst for a much broader shield of preparedness around vulnerable coasts. The Tohoku tsunami overwhelmed seawalls once thought protective. In 2011, northeastern Japan was struck by a tsunami so immense that defenses built over decades were overtopped, breached, or rendered useless in places where people had trusted them most. This was a profound shock because Japan had invested heavily in concrete seawalls, hazard planning, and coastal engineering. Yet the water exceeded expectations in many areas, climbing over barriers and pouring into towns with devastating force. The lesson was not that engineering is worthless. It was that engineering alone can create a dangerous sense of certainty if it is based on events smaller than the most extreme possibilities. Tohoku exposed the gap between designed protection and true worst-case behavior. It also changed global thinking about layered safety. Barriers matter, but so do evacuation routes, vertical refuges, public drills, and honest communication about limits. The disaster was a grim reminder that the ocean does not care what humans believed was enough. It only responds to physics. A tsunami can carry houses, ships, and trains inland. The force involved is so great that familiar objects stop behaving like objects and begin behaving like cargo. Whole houses can be lifted from foundations and floated, rolled, or smashed apart. Fishing vessels can be deposited in streets or fields. In some extreme disasters, even trains have been shoved off tracks and carried inland by moving water thick with debris. This is part of what makes tsunamis feel so unreal to witnesses. The ordinary world, loses its weight. Things we think of as fixed begin to drift or collide like toys in a flooded room. The danger increases with every object caught in the flow, because each piece of wreckage becomes a battering ram striking whatever remains. A building is not only threatened by water pressure, it is threatened by everything the water picks up along the way. In that sense, a tsunami does not just flood the land. It turns the land and its structures into part of the flood itself. The retreating water can be as deadly as the surge. After the sea rushes inland, it does not simply stop and wait. Gravity pulls it back, and that return flow can become a lethal force of its own. Water draining seaward may sweep people off their feet, drag vehicles from roads, and pull enormous amounts of debris, timber, metal, and shattered concrete back toward the ocean. In some places, the outgoing current tears through gaps between buildings and down streets with astonishing speed. Survivors who made it through the initial arrival can still be caught by the withdrawal, which often feels less dramatic than the first impact and is therefore easier to underestimate. Yet the returning water is not empty. It is heavy with wreckage and momentum. It can scour the ground, undermine structures, and create powerful currents that continue offshore. This is one of the most unsettling features of tsunamis. The sea is dangerous coming in, and then dangerous again as it tries to reclaim everything it has taken. Tsunamis kill through force, debris, and drowning all at once. Part of what makes these events so deadly is that they combine several kinds of danger into one unfolding assault. The water itself can strike with enough force to knock people down, pin them, or crush them against structures. Then there is the debris field, which may include wood, glass, metal, masonry, vehicles, and fragments of entire buildings moving at speed in every direction. And beyond both of those is the most elemental threat of all: the inability to breathe in chaotic, sediment-filled water. A person may be injured, trapped, disoriented, and submerged within seconds. This layering of hazards is why tsunamis are so much more than floods. They are violent, moving environments where visibility collapses, impact comes from all sides, and survival can depend on a few desperate moments. To understand their lethality, you have to imagine all these threats arriving together, not in sequence. The sea does not choose one method. It uses all of them. Even a modest tsunami can rip ports apart. A tsunami does not need to tower over buildings to cause serious destruction in a working harbor. Ports are full of vulnerable systems: moorings, cranes, fuel lines, floating docks, warehouses, and tightly packed vessels that depend on relatively controlled water. When a tsunami enters that environment, even a moderate rise can generate powerful currents, sudden water level changes, and violent surging that tears infrastructure apart. Boats may strain against lines until they snap and slam into one another or into piers. Floating docks can wrench free. Cargo areas can flood. Navigation channels become chaotic. The result is that a tsunami too small to look spectacular on a tourist beach may still devastate the mechanical heart of a coastal city. This matters enormously because ports are often lifelines after disasters, needed for rescue, fuel, food, and recovery. A seemingly modest event can therefore cause outsized damage by crippling the very place a community depends on most when crisis begins. A few extra feet of water can transform destruction. Near the coast, small differences in depth can decide whether water stops at the edge of a street or pushes through an entire neighborhood. That is one reason tsunami forecasting is so sensitive to details. An extra few feet of water may not sound dramatic in conversation, but on low ground it can mean the difference between wet roads and floating buildings, between a damaged harbor and a destroyed one. Once thresholds are crossed, the consequences multiply quickly. Water reaches new fuel tanks, new roads, new substations, new rows of homes. Objects that would have stayed grounded begin to move. Escape routes vanish. This is why modest-sounding changes in wave height can produce huge changes in outcome. Coastal landscapes are full of tipping points. A small rise can connect separate low areas into one broad flood path and allow the sea to spread far beyond what intuition suggests. In tsunami risk, a little more water can become a lot more catastrophe. Underwater landslides can unleash tsunamis without any great earthquake. The seafloor is not a smooth, stable plain. In many places, it is piled with loose sediment, steep slopes, and buried layers left by rivers, glaciers, and earlier eruptions. If that material suddenly gives way, a huge mass can rush downslope beneath the sea and shove water aside with startling force. Sometimes the trigger is only a moderate tremor. Sometimes the slope fails under its own weight after years of quiet buildup. That makes these events especially unsettling because a coast can be struck without the kind of gigantic earthquake people usually associate with tsunami danger. Scientists have found evidence of enormous submarine slides off continental margins around the world, some large enough to rearrange whole sections of seabed. In those moments, the ocean responds instantly. Water is displaced, long waves form, and nearby shores may have little warning at all. The danger begins below the surface, in landscapes most people never imagine are even there. Volcanoes can trigger tsunamis by collapsing into the sea. A volcanic island can look solid and permanent, yet many are built from layers of ash, lava, and fractured rock that are far less stable than they appear. Over time, magma movement, explosions, and gravity can weaken an entire flank until part of the volcano suddenly fails and plunges into the water. When that happens, the sea is displaced with extraordinary violence. The result can be a tsunami generated not by tectonic rupture, but by the sudden failure of a mountain. This possibility makes volcanic coasts especially fascinating because the danger comes from structure as much as eruption. A volcano does not need to explode in the most dramatic way to become deadly. Sometimes the catastrophe is the collapse itself. Scientists study old deposits, offshore scars, and broken island shapes to reconstruct these failures, and the evidence can be astonishing. A single unstable flank can hold the power to turn a coastal landscape into a target within minutes. A crater wall falling into water can create near-instant devastation. In volcanic lakes, coastal calderas, or island craters partly open to the sea, a collapsing wall can act with terrifying speed. Imagine millions of tons of fractured rock suddenly letting go and dropping into a confined body of water. There is no long delay, no distant ocean crossing, no hours for warnings to spread. The water is displaced almost immediately, and the resulting surge can strike surrounding shores in moments. That is what makes these settings so dangerous. The geography is already enclosed, steep, and focused. A collapse does not just create a wave. It creates one in exactly the kind of basin that can amplify it. People nearby may hear a roar, see rock and ash plunging downward, and then face a fast-rising wall of water almost at once. These events reveal how little distance is required for catastrophe. Sometimes the space between collapse and impact is not an ocean. It is only a crater rim. Glacier collapses can generate tsunamis in icy fjords. In high-latitude fjords, the danger does not always come from earthquakes or volcanoes. Sometimes it begins with ice and rock. A retreating glacier can leave steep valley walls unstable, while meltwater, thawing permafrost, and ongoing erosion weaken the slopes above narrow inlets. If a large mass of ice, debris, or entire mountainside crashes into the water, the confined fjord can produce a sudden and powerful wave. These places are especially vulnerable because the water is deep, the walls are steep, and the basin acts like a funnel. The result may be a surge that races along cold, narrow waterways with shocking speed. What makes this so compelling is the collision of climate, geology, and water in one setting. A landscape that looks frozen and still can actually be primed for violent motion. In these remote places, the beauty is immense, but so is the potential for sudden transformation when gravity finally wins. Landslide tsunamis can tower far higher than earthquake tsunamis. The tallest tsunami waves on record have often come not from giant tectonic ruptures, but from landslides crashing into confined water. That surprises many people, because earthquake tsunamis are the ones that cross oceans and dominate global headlines. Yet a landslide can transfer energy into a smaller area with astonishing concentration. Instead of pushing a vast ocean basin, it hurls a huge mass directly into a bay, fjord, or lake, where the water has nowhere broad to spread at first. The result can be a wave of almost unimaginable local height. These are not usually basin-wide events. They are brutally focused ones, devastating the nearby landscape while leaving distant coasts untouched. That contrast is part of what makes them so extraordinary. A tectonic tsunami may be larger in geographic reach, but a slide-generated wave can be more extreme in vertical scale. In the right setting, a collapsing slope can produce heights that seem almost impossible. One Alaskan mega-tsunami stripped trees from mountainsides. In 1958, a massive rockfall thundered into Lituya Bay in Alaska after a powerful earthquake destabilized the slope above the inlet. What followed remains one of the most astonishing wave events ever documented. The impact generated a surge so enormous that it swept up the surrounding slopes and removed trees to a height that still sounds almost unbelievable. The scar it left on the mountainsides became a kind of natural measuring stick, showing how high the water had climbed. Boats in the bay were caught in chaos, and the landscape was transformed in minutes. Lituya Bay matters because it demonstrates what can happen when a huge landslide strikes confined water with nowhere to disperse. It is not simply a historical curiosity. It is one of the clearest examples of extreme run-up ever observed. The stripped forest remained as evidence that, under rare conditions, water can surge higher than almost anyone would think possible. In confined bays, tsunami run-up can climb astonishing heights. Some bays do more than receive an incoming wave. They drive it upward. When a tsunami rushes into a narrow or steep-sided basin, the geometry can force the water to pile higher and higher as it loses room to spread. The shape of the shoreline, the depth of the bay, and the angle of arrival all matter. In the most dramatic cases, the water can climb slopes to heights that seem wildly out of proportion to the wave offshore. This upward rush is one reason certain locations become famous in tsunami history, while nearby coasts see much less extreme effects. A bay can act almost like a trap for momentum, redirecting horizontal motion into vertical reach. For anyone trying to understand hazard, that is a crucial insight. The coastline is not passive. It can transform the event. What arrives as a long wave may become a remarkable climb up land, leaving marks on cliffs, forests, and buildings far above expected levels. Run-up measures how high water reaches above normal sea level. This is one of the most important terms in tsunami science because it captures the vertical reach of the event on land. Scientists use it to describe the highest elevation the water attains above normal sea level at a particular location. That might be measured from debris lines, mud marks, damaged vegetation, or instrument records after the event. Run-up matters because it tells us how far upward the sea was able to climb, not merely how tall the wave looked at shore. Those are not always the same thing. A place with steep terrain may show dramatic vertical reach, even if the inland penetration is limited. Understanding this measure helps reveal why some communities need higher refuges, stronger vertical evacuation plans, or more conservative hazard maps. It turns the aftermath into data. A stain on a wall or broken branch on a hillside becomes a clue to the true behavior of the sea, written in elevation rather than distance. Inundation measures how far inland tsunami water travels, while run-up tells us how high the water got. Inundation tells a different story, how far the sea penetrated across the land. This is the horizontal reach of the flooding, and it can be surprisingly large in the right terrain. After a tsunami, scientists map debris lines, sediment deposits, watermarks, and damaged structures to determine the inland limit of the flow. That boundary matters enormously for planning, because it shows which neighborhoods, roads, fields, and critical facilities actually fall inside the footprint of danger. A wave does not have to look enormous to travel a long way if the land offers little resistance. Inundation, therefore, captures the spreading behavior of the sea after arrival. It turns the event into a shape on the map, a record of where ocean became temporary landscape. For communities near the coast, that boundary can define evacuation zones, building policies, and the difference between an alarm that feels abstract and one that feels immediate. Flat coastal plains can let tsunami water race surprisingly far inland. A low-lying coast can be far more vulnerable than appearances suggest. Without steep ground to halt the flow, water arriving from the sea may keep moving inland across fields, roads, neighborhoods, and river channels with frightening persistence. This is why gentle terrain can become such a liability during a tsunami. The sea does not need to climb much. It simply advances. Over broad plains, even modest elevation changes can be enough to guide floodwater into long corridors where it accelerates and spreads. Communities may be miles from the open shoreline and still face danger if the land between is low enough. That surprises people because distance from the beach feels like safety in ordinary thinking. In tsunami country, elevation often matters more than distance. A flat plain can act like an open invitation, allowing the ocean to keep going far beyond where intuition expects it to stop. The landscape itself decides how long the sea can continue. River mouths can pull tsunami waves deep into the interior. A river mouth can become an open doorway for the sea. When a tsunami reaches the coast, it does not always stop at the shoreline. If a broad river channel leads inland, the incoming surge can follow that path upstream with surprising ease, riding the lower ground as though the land itself were guiding it forward. That is one reason communities far from the beach can still face sudden flooding. Water that enters the river may accelerate between banks, spread into low floodplains, or push against bridges and embankments in ways that magnify local damage. In some past events, surges have traveled miles inland along river systems, carrying salt water, debris, and chaos into places that might never have considered themselves coastal. This is what makes river mouths so fascinating and so dangerous. They are not just boundaries between river and sea. During a tsunami, they can become long corridors that invite the ocean inland. Estuaries can funnel tsunami surges far from open coasts. An estuary is already a place of mixing, where river water and seawater meet in shifting channels, mudflats, and tidal passages. During a tsunami, that complexity can become a problem. Instead of dispersing harmlessly, the surge may be guided into narrowing channels that squeeze the flow and carry it inland with unnerving efficiency. Wide, marshy edges may flood first, then deeper channels can push water farther than people expect, especially where towns, roads, and ports cluster along the estuary's banks. The shape of the basin matters enormously. A broad opening to the sea, followed by narrowing waterways, can help focus the incoming motion like a giant hydraulic corridor. That means danger may extend well beyond the exposed shoreline. what looks like protected inland water, can become a hidden route for the sea's advance. Estuaries are beautiful because they are transitional landscapes. In a tsunami, that same openness to both river and ocean can become a source of extraordinary vulnerability. Coral reefs can weaken some tsunami energy, but not stop it. A healthy reef can act like a rough, shallow barrier that forces incoming water to break, slow, and lose part of its energy before it reaches shore. That is valuable, and in some places it can reduce the height or force of ordinary waves, and even help soften part of a tsunami's impact. But reefs are not magic walls. A powerful tsunami carries such a large volume of moving water that even a wide coral platform may only reduce part of the threat rather than remove it. Water can still pass over, through channels or around gaps, then flood the coast behind. The protection also depends on depth, reef shape, and the size of the event itself. This makes coral reefs deeply important, but also easy to romanticize beyond their real limits. They are natural armor, not invincibility. In the right conditions, they help, yet the sea can still cross them with devastating force when the disturbance is large enough. Mangroves may reduce damage when water arrives with debris. A mangrove forest is more than a line of trees. It is a tangled wall of roots, trunks, and branches built to live where land and sea overlap. When fast-moving water carrying wood, wreckage, and sediment passes through that kind of maze, some of its violence can be disrupted. Debris may be trapped. Flow may slow. The force striking what lies behind can be reduced in places where the mangroves are dense and extensive enough. This does not mean a coastal forest makes people safe from every tsunami. A very large event can smash through vegetation or simply overwhelm it. But where mangroves remain intact, they can sometimes buy precious reduction in speed and impact, especially against floating debris that might otherwise reach homes and roads with greater force. That makes them remarkable. They are living coastal infrastructure, grown rather than poured, and their value lies not only in beauty or biodiversity, but in the physical resistance they offer. Seawalls help in some cases, but can still fail. A seawall can block smaller surges, deflect some wave energy, and buy time in places where the expected hazard matches the design. That makes these structures valuable, and many communities rely on them for real protection. But a wall is only as effective as the event it was built to face, and tsunamis do not always respect those assumptions. Water may overtop the barrier, pour through weak points, scour away the ground behind it, or exploit gaps at river channels and harbor entrances. In some cases, the wall itself remains standing, while the community behind it is still flooded. In others, the impact is so extreme that sections are damaged or bypassed entirely. That is why seawalls are best understood as one layer of defense rather than the whole answer. They are useful, sometimes life-saving, but never a reason to forget evacuation, warning, and elevation. Concrete can slow the sea. It cannot guarantee control over it. Vertical evacuation saves lives when high ground is too far. In some coastal towns, there is simply no chance of reaching natural high ground before the water arrives. The land is too flat, the roads too crowded, or the source too close. In those places, the best option may be to go up rather than away. Vertical evacuation means moving people into specially designed tall structures, rooftops, or reinforced towers built to withstand the force of fast-moving water and debris. It is one of the most practical and dramatic ideas in tsunami safety because it accepts a hard truth. Sometimes escape across the landscape is impossible. Instead, survival depends on climbing above the level the sea is likely to reach. These structures turn architecture into emergency topography, creating artificial hills in places nature did not provide them. For schools, neighborhoods, and low-lying districts, that can make the difference between helpless exposure and a reachable refuge. When there is no time to run far, height itself becomes the escape route. Minutes matter more than maps during a local tsunami. Hazard maps are vital before a disaster. They show zones, routes, and likely flood areas. But when a nearby source sends water toward shore, the timeline can collapse so quickly that all the preparation in the world comes down to one thing: immediate movement. In a local tsunami, people may have only minutes between the end of strong shaking and the first surge. There may be no time to check a phone, study a route, or wait for someone else to decide. That is why the most important action is often brutally simple. Move to safety now. The map matters because it taught you where safety lies before the day arrived. Once the event begins, hesitation becomes the real enemy. This is one of the most gripping lessons in tsunami education. Knowledge has to become instinct. A nearby tsunami does not leave much room for analysis. It rewards recognition, speed, and the ability to act before certainty feels complete. Long shaking is nature's clearest tsunami warning. Sirens can fail. Electricity can go out. Phones can lose signal. But the ground itself can deliver a warning no technology is needed to interpret. If you are near the coast and the shaking is strong enough that standing becomes difficult, or long enough that it feels deeply unnatural, that is one of the clearest signs that a tsunami may follow. The reason is simple. The largest tsunami-genic earthquakes often involve huge ruptures that last much longer than ordinary local tremors. The shaking is the message from the fault before the water arrives. In coastal safety campaigns around the world, this natural warning is taught with great urgency because it reaches everyone at once. You do not need an expert beside you. You do not need a screen. If the earth keeps moving, go. That principle is powerful because it turns the first phase of the disaster into a life-saving signal, written directly into the experience of the quake itself. If the sea suddenly retreats, run uphill immediately. There are few clearer visual warnings in nature. A beach that empties rapidly, a harbor floor exposed where water should be, fish flopping on wet sand, boats suddenly grounded in places that were floating moments before. All of it points to one thing. The ocean is not behaving normally, and the next movement may be deadly. This retreat happens when part of the tsunami draws water seaward before the larger return arrives. To anyone unaware of the danger, the scene can look eerie, fascinating, even irresistible. That is exactly why it is so dangerous. The exposed shoreline invites curiosity at the moment. Curiosity is most lethal. The correct response is not to get a better look. It is to move to higher ground at once and keep going until you are well clear. In tsunami survival, hesitation can cost everything. When the sea pulls back in sudden silence, that silence is not calm. It is a final warning. People often lose precious time by going closer to watch. Disasters exert a terrible kind of magnetism. When something rare and astonishing begins to happen, many people do the most human thing possible. They stop, stare, film, call others over, or walk closer to understand what they are seeing. With tsunamis, that instinct can be fatal. The sea may look strange long before it looks deadly, and those extra moments spent watching can erase the margin needed to escape. History is full of accounts in which people survived the earthquake, noticed odd water behavior, and then lost time to curiosity. Some went back for photographs. Some stood on sea walls. Some called family members instead of running first. That is one reason tsunami education emphasizes decisive action so strongly. The danger is not only the water, it is the pause before the water. In that pause, the mind searches for certainty, while the clock is already running out. The safest choice often feels abrupt. That is exactly why it saves lives. Curiosity has killed many who survived the earthquake itself. There is a cruel moment that often follows the shaking, when people step outside, see that they are still alive, and believe the worst has passed. That is exactly when danger can become deadliest. Some survivors walk toward the shore to inspect damage. Others go to collect belongings, search for boats, or watch the strange behavior of the sea. In those minutes, curiosity can become a trap. Tsunamis often arrive after the earthquake, not during it, which means the instinct to assess, observe, or return can place people directly in harm's way. Historical accounts from many coasts describe the same pattern. People survived the ground movement, then lost their lives because they moved closer instead of farther. It is one of the most haunting truths in tsunami history. The first disaster can create a false sense of survival, while the second is already on its way. What feels like cautionary curiosity can become a fatal delay. Tsunami sirens are helpful, but natural warnings come first. Modern warning systems are valuable, and sirens can save lives by alerting people quickly across towns and coastlines. But a siren is only useful if the system behind it survives the event, reaches the right area, and sounds in time. Nature sometimes speaks sooner. Strong ground shaking, sudden sea retreat, or an unusual roaring from the coast can all arrive before any official signal. That is why tsunami education places so much emphasis on recognizing natural warnings. Technology is powerful, but it depends on equipment, communication, and human decisions. The Earth does not wait for any of those things. In a nearby event, the sea may begin moving towards shore while authorities are still confirming details. This makes natural warning recognition one of the most democratic forms of safety. It belongs to everyone, whether their phone works or not. A siren is a tool. The senses are immediate. When seconds matter, that difference can decide everything. Some coastal schools practice tsunami routes like fire drills. In parts of the world where tsunami danger is part of life, children grow up learning that escape is not theoretical. It is something you rehearse with your own feet. Schools in vulnerable coastal areas sometimes practice evacuation routes, the way other places practice fire drills. Students hear the signal, leave classrooms quickly, and move toward high ground or designated vertical shelters in a calm but urgent flow. This training matters because a real event can happen during school hours when hundreds of children may need to move fast with very little time. Repetition turns confusion into muscle memory. It teaches teachers, students, and staff where to go, how long it takes, and where problems might arise before a disaster exposes them. There is something deeply moving about that image, children running practiced routes not out of fear alone, but out of a community's decision to treat survival as a skill. Preparedness becomes part of ordinary education. Painted escape lines can guide people through panic and darkness. When fear hits, even a familiar town can become hard to read. Streets blur into choices, crowds block intersections, and the mind can narrow until simple decisions feel impossible. That is why some tsunami-prone communities paint evacuation lines, arrows, or route markers directly onto roads, walls, and sidewalks. These markings turn the built environment into a guide that remains visible when memory falters. In panic, people do not always think clearly enough to interpret a map or remember a lesson from months before. A bright line underfoot or a clear arrow ahead reduces hesitation. It says, "Go this way now." That simplicity can be life-saving, especially at night, in heavy rain, or after an earthquake has cut power and filled the air with confusion. These markings are humble compared with advanced sensors or warning centers, yet they embody an important truth. Survival often depends on guidance that works in the worst possible moment, not just the calm one. The safest route is usually up, not away. When people imagine escaping danger, they often picture moving farther from it in a straight line. With tsunamis, that instinct can be misleading. The sea can spread inland across roads, fields, and neighborhoods faster than expected, which means simply moving away from the shoreline may not be enough if the land stays low. Elevation is often the true goal. Even a short climb to higher ground can be far more effective than a long run across flat terrain. This principle is one of the central insights of tsunami survival. You do not need to outrun the entire ocean. You need to get above the part of the landscape it can reasonably reach. Hills, ridges, bluffs, and reinforced vertical refuges matter because they change the geometry of the problem. Distance can help, but height changes the odds immediately. In that sense, safety is often less about horizontal escape and more about rising out of the sea's pathway. Tsunami warnings depend on both sensors and fast decisions. A warming system is not a single machine. It is a chain. Seismometers detect earthquakes. Ocean instruments confirm whether the sea has actually been disturbed. Communication systems send information to warning centers, where experts interpret incomplete data under intense time pressure. Then officials must decide whether to issue alerts, where to target them, and how urgently to word them. Each link matters. A sensor can be brilliant, but if the interpretation is too slow, the warning may come too late. A warning can be fast, but if it is too vague or reaches the wrong places, people may not act. This is what makes tsunami alerts so fascinating from a systems perspective. They sit at the intersection of geophysics, engineering, communication, and human judgment. The science begins with the Earth, but survival depends on what happens next in rooms full of screens, models, and difficult decisions. A warning is not just data. It is speed made meaningful. Deep ocean buoys can detect a passing tsunami from pressure changes. Far out at sea, long before a wave reaches shore, one of the most sensitive warning tools may be sitting quietly in deep water, listening not with ears, but with pressure sensors. These systems can detect the tiny change in water pressure caused by a tsunami passing overhead, even when the sea surface above looks almost calm. That is extraordinary, because it means an instrument on the ocean floor can sense a broad pulse moving across miles of deep water and relay that information upward through a buoy to satellites and warning centers. The wave may be subtle to the eye, yet unmistakable to the sensor. This capability transformed tsunami warning science because it allowed experts to confirm that a dangerous wave was really traveling through the ocean, rather than relying only on earthquake size and assumptions. In a sense, the ocean began reporting on itself. Deep water, once largely silent in hazard monitoring, became part of the warning conversation. Satellites help track sea surface changes across enormous distances. A tsunami can travel across such vast stretches of ocean that understanding it requires a truly planetary view. Satellites help provide that perspective. Some can measure the height of the sea surface with extraordinary precision as they pass overhead, detecting subtle bulges and depressions that may reveal the passage of a long wave across open water. Others support warning efforts by relaying data from remote ocean instruments, linking isolated buoys and coastal stations to monitoring centers thousands of miles away. What makes this so striking is the scale. A disturbance born from a fault rupture on the seafloor can be tracked in part from space, where instruments orbit above the planet and watch the sea for changes too broad or too slight for ordinary observation. It is one of the most elegant pairings in modern hazard science, Earth's deepest motions meeting technology far above the atmosphere. Space-based observation does not replace local action. but it expands our vision across entire ocean basins. Tide gauges reveal when a tsunami begins reshaping a coast. Fixed to piers, harbors, and shorelines around the world, tide gauges were originally meant to record ordinary changes in sea level. During a tsunami, those same instruments become witnesses to something far less ordinary. They show how quickly water rises and falls, how repeated surges arrive, and how local coastlines are responding in real time. One station may record a sharp first drawdown. Another may show rapid oscillations in a harbor basin. Together, these records help scientists and warning centers understand how the wave is interacting with the coast as it arrives. That matters because offshore predictions must eventually meet local reality, and tide gauges provide some of the clearest evidence of that meeting. They turn the shoreline into data. A harbor that looks calm one day and violent the next leaves a precise record in a simple line of measurements. In that way, the coast begins telling its own story as the event unfolds. Computers can simulate a tsunami before the full wave arrives. As soon as a major earthquake occurs, computers can begin modeling how a tsunami might spread across the ocean, which coastlines it may threaten, and when the first waves could arrive. These simulations use fault estimates, seafloor maps, coastal topography, and wave physics to produce forecasts that are often impressively fast. What makes this remarkable is that the ocean does not have to be fully observed everywhere in order for scientists to start anticipating its behavior. The model becomes a kind of early glimpse into the future, updated as more information arrives from buoys, gauges, and seismic networks. Of course, no model is perfect. A small error in the source or seabed can alter details. But these simulations are indispensable because they give warning centers something precious during a crisis, time to think ahead of the wave. In a disaster measured in minutes and hours, a good forecast is not just science. It is borrowed time. Seafloor maps help scientists predict which coastlines face the worst run-up. The shape of the ocean floor matters long before a tsunami reaches land. Beneath the surface are ridges, canyons, shelves, slopes, and submerged valleys that can steer, slow, or concentrate wave energy on its way toward shore. By mapping those features in detail, scientists can build far better forecasts of where the water is likely to climb highest. A broad, shallow shelf may transform the wave one way, while a steep offshore drop or hidden submarine channel may guide energy toward a very different stretch of coast. That is why seafloor mapping has become so important in hazard science. It reveals the invisible architecture that the wave must cross before it strikes any town or harbor. In a sense, the tsunami begins interacting with the landscape long before people on land notice anything. The coastline may be visible danger, but the underwater topography offshore often decides how fierce that danger will become by the time it arrives. A coastline's shape can matter as much as the quake. A massive earthquake may create the tsunami, but the shoreline often decides how that tsunami is experienced. A straight open coast may receive the energy in one way, while a curved bay, narrow harbor, or deeply indented inlet can transform the same event into something far more concentrated. That is why neighboring communities can live through very different versions of the same disaster. One town may see damaging flooding, while another nearby faces a far more violent surge simply because the coast bends, narrows, or focuses the incoming water differently. This makes coastlines feel almost like instruments, each with its own response to the same force. The earthquake provides the initial note. The shore determines how that note is amplified, twisted, or sustained. For scientists and planners, this is a crucial truth. Hazard does not come only from the size of the source. It also comes from the way the land receives what the ocean brings. One island can shield another from the worst energy. Across archipelagos and broken coastlines, Islands do not simply sit in the sea as isolated pieces of land. During a tsunami, they can also act as barriers, interrupting, scattering, or redirecting part of the incoming wave energy before it reaches places beyond them. A larger island may block the most direct path toward a smaller one in its lee, reducing the force that eventually arrives. Channels, gaps, and island spacing all matter because the energy can still bend around obstacles and pass through openings. But the broad principle is striking. Land in the water can cast a kind of hydrodynamic shadow. That means one island may owe part of its survival to another, standing between it and the open approach of the wave. This adds a beautiful complexity to tsunami behavior. A chain of islands is not just scenery on a map. It is a three-dimensional obstacle course through which the energy must thread its way. Reflected waves can rebound and complicate later arrivals. A tsunami does not always spend all its force in the first collision with land. When part of the wave meets a steep coast, cliff, arbor wall, or broad shelf, some of that energy can reflect back into the water rather than disappearing entirely. Those rebounding waves may then cross paths with incoming surges or strike other shores later from surprising directions. This can make the event much more complicated than a simple one-way arrival from the open sea. In enclosed or irregular basins, the ocean may continue moving in intersecting patterns long after the first impact, with reflected energy helping sustain oscillations and confusing the sequence of later surges. For people near the coast, this means the sea can remain unpredictable even after the initial threat seems to have passed. For scientists, it is a reminder that shorelines are not just targets. They are active participants in the wave field, capable of sending part of the disturbance back into motion. Tsunamis can wrap around headlands and strike unexpected shores. A headland may look like a sturdy shield jutting into the sea, yet a tsunami can bend around it and reach places that seem protected at first glance. Because these waves are so long and behave on such large scales, they do not simply move in straight lines like something thrown across the water. As they encounter coasts, bends, and underwater contours, their energy can diffract and spread into zones that might appear hidden from direct approach. That is why a shoreline tucked behind a prominent point of land may still face dangerous flooding or currents. The headland can alter the pattern, but not necessarily block it. This ability to bend and reach unexpected areas is one of the reasons tsunami hazard maps can surprise people. Local intuition often assumes a visible obstacle guarantees safety. Physics is less reassuring. The ocean can curve around the landscape and arrive from angles that feel counterintuitive, making apparently sheltered shores more exposed than they seem. A distant tsunami may arrive hours after the earthquake that made it. One of the strangest features of these waves is the long silence that can exist between cause and consequence. An earthquake may happen far away, reported on the news, felt by no one in your town. And then many hours later, the sea at your coast begins to behave in dangerous ways. That delay can be deceptive. People may assume that if nothing happened right away, nothing will happen at all. Yet across large ocean basins, travel times measured in hours are entirely possible, and distant coasts can still receive destructive surges long after the original rupture has ended. This creates a very different kind of threat from a local tsunami. There may be time for warnings, evacuations, and preparation, but only if people take the delay seriously, rather than mistaking it for safety. The disaster, in effect, travels across time as well as distance. The earthquake is over, but its oceanic consequence is still on the way. Far-field tsunamis test warning systems across entire oceans. When a tsunami crosses an ocean basin and threatens distant shores, the challenge becomes one of coordination on a huge scale. Warning centers must estimate travel times, issue alerts for multiple nations, update forecasts as new observations arrive, and communicate risk clearly to populations spread across vast coastlines. This is where far-field events become an extraordinary systems test. It is not only about the physics of the wave. It is about whether information can move faster and more clearly than fear, confusion, or complacency. Different countries may have different languages, technologies, protocols, and levels of preparedness, yet all may be facing the same moving threat. That makes these events uniquely revealing. They show where international cooperation works, where communication breaks down, and how well science travels when it must cross both oceans and institutions. A far-field tsunami is therefore more than a distant wave. It is a test of whether the modern world can think and act together across enormous space. Near-field tsunamis leave almost no time to react. When the source is close to shore, the ocean does not grant much mercy. The earthquake ends, or the landslide or collapse occurs, and the wave may arrive within minutes. There may be no long warning cascade, no time for careful forecasts, and no comfortable gap between recognizing danger and escaping it. That is what makes near-field events so brutal. They compress decision-making into a handful of moments. In these situations, survival depends less on official confirmation and more on immediate recognition, practiced movement, and a direct path to safety. Communities near major tsunami sources live with a very different kind of clock from those facing only distant threats. Their danger is intimate and fast. The sea is not crossing half an ocean. It is already nearby, reorganized by the event and moving toward land almost at once. In hazard terms, proximity changes everything. The shorter the travel time, the more unforgiving hesitation becomes. Local tsunamis are often the most terrifying and least forgiving. There is something especially frightening about a tsunami born almost on your doorstep. The event may begin with violent shaking, collapsing objects, dust in the air, and immediate confusion. Before people have even processed the earthquake, the ocean may already be preparing its next blow. There is little time to call for advice, gather possessions, or wait for certainty. That closeness makes the experience raw in a way distant tsunamis are not. The same ground that just threw you off balance may have generated the water now rushing toward you. For coastal communities near subduction zones, volcanic islands, or unstable slopes, this is the most intimate form of tsunami danger. It arrives with almost no emotional distance between cause and effect. That is why local events are so often the deadliest and hardest to escape. They do not merely threaten the coast. They collapse the timeline of the disaster until the only real option is immediate action. Some tsunami deposits remain hidden beneath fields for centuries. Long after the water has vanished and memory has faded, a tsunami can leave a secret layer behind. Sand, shells, marine microfossils, and bits of ocean sediment may be washed inland and buried beneath soil, marsh, or farmland, where they remain hidden for generations. To the eye above ground, the field may look ordinary. Crops grow. Roads pass nearby. Houses are built. Yet below the surface lies a preserved signature of a day when the sea reached much farther than anyone living there might imagine. These buried deposits are among the most important clues scientists use to reconstruct older tsunamis that were never written down in detail. By digging cores and trenches, researchers can find these layers and read them like pages in a forgotten archive. That makes the ground itself a historian. Beneath quiet landscapes, the sea's past advances may still be waiting, sealed in mud and sand, ready to be discovered centuries later. Sand layers inland can reveal forgotten disasters. Imagine cutting into an ordinary coastal field and finding, beneath dark soil and plant roots, a thin, pale band of beach sand where no beach should be. That is one of the ways scientists discovered tsunamis that vanished from living memory. When the sea rushes far inland, it can spread marine sand across marshes, fields, and low ground, then leave that layer behind as the landscape slowly settles back into ordinary life. Over time, new soil forms above it, hiding the evidence. But the buried sand remains, a sudden ocean signature in the wrong place. Its grain size, chemistry, and tiny marine organisms can help show that it came from the shore rather than from a river flood or storm. In that sense, each inland sand sheet is a message from a forgotten coastline. It says the sea was here once, far beyond its usual reach, even if no written witness remains to tell the story. Ghost forests can mark coastlines dropped suddenly by great quakes. Sometimes the clearest sign of an ancient tsunami begins with dead trees. Along certain coasts, scientists have found ghost forests, stands of cedar or spruce killed when the land beneath them suddenly dropped during a great earthquake. Salt water flooded in, the roots died, and the trees were left standing as grey, silent markers of a coastline that had abruptly sunk. These drowned forests are extraordinary because they capture the earthquake and tsunami story together. First, the fault moved. Then the land subsided. Then the sea invaded places that had once stood safely above it. In tidal flats and estuaries, the trunks may remain preserved for centuries, allowing researchers to date the event and compare it with offshore fault evidence and tsunami deposits nearby. A ghost forest is haunting to look at, but scientifically, it is even more powerful. It shows that the coast itself can drop in moments, turning living woodland into a drowned archive. Buried marshes preserve evidence of ancient tsunami flooding. Marshes are some of the best memory keepers on a coastline. Their quiet waters and soft sediments build up slowly, layer by layer, preserving pollen, plant remains, mud, and traces of changing sea levels over long spans of time. When a tsunami tears across a marsh, it interrupts that calm record with something abrupt. Marine sand may be spread across the surface. Salt water may alter the plants that grow afterward. Broken shells, drift material, and changed sediment layers can all become part of the archive. Later, when scientists extract cores from the marsh, they can read those shifts as evidence of sudden coastal flooding. What makes this so fascinating is the contrast. Marshes seem gentle and still, yet beneath that softness they can preserve violent history with remarkable fidelity. A quiet wetland can hold the memory of a catastrophic day far more clearly than a ruined building ever could, because mud keeps secrets longer than stone. Marine fossils inland can expose the sea's violent reach. When ocean creatures or fragments of them turn up far inland, they can tell a startling story. Tiny marine shells, coral pieces, and microscopic organisms called foraminifera belong in coastal or offshore environments, not in low fields, lakeside sediments, or inland marsh layers. If they appear there in a sudden deposit, especially alongside sand and other marine material, they may reveal that the sea once surged violently across the land. This is one of the most elegant clues in tsunami research. The fossils do not speak with drama. They simply appear where they should not be, and that quiet mismatch can be enough to expose a long-forgotten disaster. Scientists compare the species in the layer with modern coastal habitats to estimate where the material came from and how far it traveled. In that sense, ancient waves leave behind not just sediment, but passengers from the ocean, carried inland as witnesses to an extraordinary reach. Scientists read tsunami history from mud like a book. To most of us, mud looks like the opposite of information. Yet to a geologist, a muddy core taken from the coastal plain can read almost like a narrative. Dark organic layers may show years of slow marsh growth. Thin sand bands may interrupt that calm record with the signature of sudden flooding. Changes in grain size, chemistry, pollen, and microscopic life can reveal whether the water came from a river, a storm surge, or the sea itself. By comparing one layer to the next, scientists can reconstruct not only that a tsunami happened, but sometimes how often similar events have visited the coast over centuries or even millennia. What makes this so compelling is the patience of it. The ocean writes its history not only in dramatic ruins, but in thin, quiet layers that settle out after the violence has passed. Mud becomes memory, and careful reading turns an anonymous wetland into a chronicle of ancient catastrophe. Tree rings can record the year a tsunami struck. A tree can keep time with astonishing precision. Each growing season adds a new ring, and those rings respond to drought, cold, insect attacks, fire, and sudden changes in the land around the tree. Along some coasts, that means trees can help pinpoint the exact year a tsunami linked to a great earthquake transformed the landscape. If the ground drops, salt water invades, roots die, and the tree stops growing. By matching its final ring with patterns from other trees in the region, scientists can identify when that sudden change happened. In some famous cases, this method has helped connect coastal evidence in North America with written records of an orphan tsunami that struck Japan across the Pacific. That is extraordinary. A dead tree on one shore and a written account on another can meet across time and confirm the same event. The forest becomes a clock, and the sea's violence leaves a date behind. Coastal boulders can be thrown inland by astonishing wave force. There are places where enormous stones sit far from the shoreline, perched in fields or on coastal terraces where ordinary storms seem far too weak to have moved them. In some cases, tsunamis are the leading explanation. A powerful wave can lift, roll, or slide massive boulders inland, especially where the coastline is steep, rocky, and exposed to concentrated flow. What makes this so fascinating is the scale mismatch between what we think water should be able to do and what it sometimes actually does. A boulder feels permanent. It feels like landscape itself. Yet in the right conditions, moving water can treat it like freight. Scientists study the size, shape, and position of these displaced rocks to estimate what kind of flow would have been required to move them. The result is often humbling. A coastal boulder field can become evidence not of slow erosion, but of a brief, violent moment when the sea had enough force to rearrange stone. Some tsunami boulders are larger than small houses. The phrase sounds exaggerated until you stand beside one. On certain coasts, researchers have documented blocks of coral limestone or bedrock so large that they resemble buildings more than stones, yet evidence suggests some were shifted by extreme tsunami waves. These giant boulders can weigh hundreds or even thousands of tons. Moving them requires an astonishing combination of water depth, speed, buoyancy, and impact. That is why they matter so much. They provide a physical measure of what the sea was capable of during a past event. A damaged wall can be rebuilt. A frightened story can fade. But a house-sized rock, sitting where it should not be, becomes a durable argument. It says the wave that came here was far beyond the ordinary. For scientists, these megalithic clues are both puzzle and proof. For everyone else, they are a reminder that under rare conditions, the ocean can move pieces of the earth that seem almost immovable. Tsunamis can reshape beaches in a single afternoon. A coastline that took years or decades to settle into one form can be altered in hours when a tsunami arrives. Sandbars may be ripped apart. Dunes can be cut through or flattened. Channels may open where none existed before, while other parts of the beach are stripped bare down to older layers beneath. In some places, the sea deposits new sand inland and leaves the shoreline lower and narrower than it had been that morning. In others, debris and sediment are rearranged so completely that familiar landmarks disappear. This is part of what makes tsunami damage so disorienting after the water retreats. The beach people return to may no longer be the one they knew. The event has not only flooded the coast, It has edited it. Beaches are always changing, of course, but usually on the scale of seasons and storms. A tsunami accelerates that process violently, compressing years of coastal change into a single afternoon of upheaval. Ports often suffer badly because currents become wild and chaotic. The great danger in a port is not always the height of the water. It is the motion within it. When a tsunami enters a harbor basin, channels, docks, and breakwaters can scramble the flow into fast surges, sudden reversals, whirlpools, and powerful horizontal currents that are far more destructive than a PhD. Simple rise and fall. Water may race down one side of a basin, reflect, then return through another opening with a different speed and direction. Ships strain against moorings. Pilings are struck from odd angles. Floating infrastructure twists, breaks loose, and collides. This is why ports can be devastated even when nearby observers do not see a dramatic wall of water. The violence is in the current field. For mariners, that makes tsunami behavior especially treacherous, because ordinary intuition about tides and harbor water can fail completely. A working port depends on predictability. During a tsunami, predictability vanishes and the whole basin turns hostile. Boats left in water may survive better than boats on shore. This sounds backwards until you think about where the real violence often happens. A vessel floating freely in deep enough water may simply rise and fall with the passing wave, especially if it is far from shore and clear of dangerous currents, docks, and other craft. On land, or half-hauled out near the shore, the same boat can become helpless. Water can lift it off supports, slam it into buildings, roll it across pavement, or smash it under debris. In harbors, the situation is more complicated because moorings, piers, and confined currents create chaos. But in open water beyond the worst coastal turbulence, a boat sometimes has a better chance than one stranded near land. This is one reason some mariners, when given enough warning and the right conditions, head for deeper offshore water rather than staying tied up. The ocean is still dangerous there, but it may be less mechanically destructive than the shoreline. Fires sometimes follow tsunamis when fuel and debris collide. Water and fire seem like opposites, yet after a tsunami they can arrive as partners in destruction. Coastal towns often contain fuel tanks, gas lines, vehicles, fishing boats, damaged electrical systems, and shattered buildings full of flammable material. When the sea tears through, it can rupture those systems, scatter fuel across the flood, and then carry burning debris from one place to another. In some disasters, flames have spread across floating wreckage and ignited neighborhoods already broken by water. That creates a terrifying second phase, because survivors are no longer dealing only with flooding and debris, but with fire moving through a landscape made unstable by salt water and collapse. Emergency response becomes much harder when roads are blocked, water systems are damaged, and the ground itself is coated in wreckage. It is one of the cruelest features of tsunami aftermath. Even after the sea has passed, destruction may continue in a completely different element. Saltwater flooding can ruin farmland long after the water leaves. The disaster does not end when the fields dry. When tsunami water spreads across farmland, it leaves salt behind in the soil, and that salt can poison crops long after the visible flooding is over. Plants that once grew easily may fail to sprout, wilt early, or yield far less than before. Irrigation systems can be damaged, drainage channels clogged, and fertile topsoil stripped away or buried under sand and marine debris. In low coastal plains, this agricultural damage can linger for seasons or even years, depending on rainfall, soil type, and the work needed to flush the land clean again. That makes tsunami impact deeply economic as well as physical. A farming community may survive the wave only to face the loss of its harvests and income afterward. It is a reminder that the sea changes more than buildings and shorelines. It can alter the chemistry of the land itself, turning productive soil into a lingering aftermath. Drinking water can become dangerously contaminated after coastal inundation. Fresh water systems are fragile in ways many people never notice until disaster exposes them. When a tsunami floods wells, reservoirs, storage tanks and pipelines with seawater, mud, sewage, fuel and debris, the result can be a severe drinking water crisis. A village may still have standing buildings and surviving roads, yet lack one of the most basic conditions for recovery: safe water. Wells near the coast are especially vulnerable because salt water can seep downward and linger in groundwater after the visible flooding has gone. Pipes may crack. Pumps may fail. Contaminants from damaged infrastructure can spread through systems that normally feel invisible and dependable. This is why humanitarian response after a tsunami often focuses quickly on bottled water, purification, and emergency sanitation. Thirst, infection, and contamination begin working quietly after the dramatic phase ends. The wave passes in hours, but the threat to clean water can shape daily life for a long time afterward. Survivors often face disease, displacement, and trauma after the waves. The most visible destruction happens during impact, but the human aftermath can unfold for months and years. People may lose homes, relatives, schools, workplaces, and the familiar landmarks that anchored ordinary life. Crowded shelters can create conditions where infection spreads more easily, especially if clean water and sanitation are limited. Medical systems may be damaged at exactly the moment they are needed most. At the same time, survivors often carry invisible injuries, shock, grief, survivor's guilt, and the repeated return of terrifying memories. Children may fear the sea. Adults may fear sleep, shaking ground, or heavy rain. Entire communities can be uprooted and relocated, sometimes permanently, because the places they knew have become unsafe or unlivable. This is what makes tsunami recovery so much more than rebuilding walls and roads. The wave passes quickly, but the emotional and social consequences can keep moving through a community long after the shoreline looks calm again. Tsunami risk rises where dense cities meet low coasts. A low coast becomes far more dangerous when it is packed with people, roads, industry, schools, hospitals, and vertical obstacles that can slow evacuation. In a dense city, a tsunami is not just a geophysical event. It becomes a problem of traffic, crowd movement, communication, infrastructure failure, and the sheer difficulty of moving large populations quickly enough. Narrow streets clog. Bridges become bottlenecks. Warning messages must reach residents, workers, visitors, and people in transit all at once. Dense urban coastlines also concentrate what can be lost. Ports, power stations, transport hubs, and neighborhoods may all sit in the same low zone. This makes the potential consequences enormous even when the water height is not extreme. Modern coastal cities are powerful because they gather people and systems together. That same concentration becomes a vulnerability when the sea enters the landscape. The more life and infrastructure compressed into low ground, the higher the stakes of every minute. Tourism can put huge populations in danger during holiday seasons. A coastal town may know its tsunami routes well, yet during peak travel periods, its population can swell far beyond a number of permanent residents. Hotels fill, beaches crowd, restaurants overflow, and suddenly thousands of people are present who do not know the local warning signs, the evacuation roads, or the nearest high ground. That creates a special form of risk. Visitors may not understand sirens, may not speak the local language, or may hesitate because they assume someone else will explain what is happening. Many are there precisely because the coast looks beautiful and welcoming, which makes it even harder to imagine immediate danger. In resort areas, timing matters too. A busy holiday shoreline can place huge numbers of people in exposed areas at the worst possible moment. This is why tsunami planning in tourist regions must include multilingual signs, clear escape routes, and education that works instantly. A beautiful coast can become crowded vulnerability in a single season. Some of the safest buildings are designed as artificial high ground. In very low coastal regions, engineers and planners sometimes solve the problem of missing hills by building them in another form. Special structures can be designed to resist tsunami forces while elevating large numbers of people above expected flood levels. These buildings may look like schools, community centers, parking structures, or towers. Yet, in an emergency, they become something much more important: a manufactured piece of safe elevation in a landscape that does not naturally offer it. This idea is powerful because it treats survival as a design problem rather than a matter of luck. If the land is too flat and the warning time too short, then the refuge must be placed inside the built environment itself. Such buildings often require strong foundations, open lower levels to let water pass, and upper platforms sized for sudden crowds. In the right place, a well-designed refuge can do what geography cannot: provide reachable height where none existed before. Engineers now build rooftop refuges for tsunami evacuation. Some modern evacuation structures are designed with the roof itself as the destination. Instead of treating the top of a building as a forgotten utility space, engineers plan it as a life-saving platform, reachable by stairs, strong enough for crowds, and high enough to remain above modeled flood levels. In a real emergency, that changes everything. People do not need to guess whether a building is safe or whether the roof will hold them. The refuge is intentional, visible, and built into community planning from the start. This is especially important in places where flat terrain and short warning times make horizontal escape unreliable. A rooftop refuge can transform an ordinary public building into a vertical survival route, turning schools, civic centers, or dedicated towers into emergency sanctuaries. There is something striking about that image: a roof no longer marking the end of a structure, but the beginning of safety. Architecture becomes evacuation in 3 dimensions. Coastal planning can save more lives than any single barrier. No single wall, sensor, or building can solve tsunami risk by itself. What saves lives most consistently is a broad planning approach that shapes the coast before disaster arrives. That includes where homes are built, how much open space is preserved, where schools and hospitals are placed, how evacuation routes are marked, where vertical refuges stand, and how communities practice moving under pressure. Good planning accepts that some flooding may happen and focuses on reducing exposure rather than pretending exposure can be eliminated. That is why it can be more powerful than one impressive barrier. A wall may fail or be overtopped. A well-planned coast still gives people routes, elevation, setbacks, warning culture, and room to escape. In that sense, planning is the quiet hero of tsunami safety. It rarely looks dramatic in photographs, yet it shapes who is in danger, who can move, and who has a realistic chance of surviving when the sea changes suddenly. Sea level rise can make future tsunami flooding reach farther inland. A tsunami does not arrive on an empty stage. It meets the coastline as it exists that day, with whatever sea level, beach shape, and tidal conditions are already in place. If the baseline sea stands higher, then the wave begins its inland push from a higher starting point. That means places once just above danger may become newly exposed, and water may pass more easily over dunes, through defenses, and across low ground that once offered a little extra protection. The difference does not need to be dramatic to matter. Coastal flooding often works through thresholds, and once those thresholds are crossed, the sea can spread into roads, neighborhoods, and wetlands much more efficiently. This is why future tsunami risk is not only about future earthquakes, it is also about the slowly changing position of the shoreline itself. A coast that sits lower relative to the sea may give the same wave more room to travel and more opportunities to do damage. A smaller tsunami at high tide can behave like a larger one. The danger of a tsunami depends not only on the wave, but also on the water level it meets when it arrives. If a modest tsunami reaches shore at high tide, the sea is already standing higher than usual before the extra surge even begins. That can make the event act more like a larger tsunami arriving at a lower tide. Water reaches seawalls sooner. Flooding starts from farther inland. Harbors, river mouths, and low streets may fill more quickly because the normal margin between land and sea has already been reduced. This matters because people often focus on the size of the tsunami alone, when in reality, timing can sharply change the outcome. A coast is never static. Tides are always raising and lowering the starting line. In practical terms, that means two tsunamis of similar size can produce very different effects depending on when they arrive. The sea does not strike a fixed coast. It strikes one already in motion. Even lakes can produce tsunami-like waves after landslides. You do not need an ocean to witness the basic physics of a tsunami. If a huge mass of rock, ice, or earth crashes into a lake, the displaced water can surge outward in powerful long waves that behave very much like tsunamis. In narrow alpine lakes, reservoir basins, and steep-walled inland waterways, those waves can rise quickly and strike nearby shores with shocking force. The danger is especially great where the slopes above the water are unstable, because a sudden collapse can give people almost no warning at all. Some historic landslide disasters have shown that inland water can become every bit as violent as a seacoast when enough mass enters it at speed. That is what makes these events so fascinating. The phenomenon is not truly about oceans. It is about displacement, gravity, and the movement of water on a large scale. A mountain lake can become a tsunami landscape in a single terrible moment. Other worlds may also host giant waves in alien seas. Once you understand the basic principle, the imagination naturally widens beyond Earth. Wherever there is liquid, gravity, and a large sudden disturbance, something tsunami-like becomes possible. On icy moons with hidden oceans beneath frozen crusts, a collapse of ice or an impact from space could, in theory, send immense waves through alien water. On methane-rich worlds with lakes and seas of hydrocarbons, the fluid would be different, but the underlying mechanics would still invite the same question. Could a falling cliff, a shifting crust, or a cosmic strike launch giant waves there too? Planetary science has not watched such events unfold directly, yet the idea is scientifically grounded and deeply captivating. It reminds us that tsunamis are not only an Earth story. They are a broader story about how worlds respond when large bodies of liquid are suddenly disturbed. Even in the outer solar system, the language of moving water may have distant cousins. The moon shapes tides, but not most so-called tidal waves. This is where everyday intuition goes wrong in a revealing way. The moon absolutely does move the oceans, drawing them into the slow rise and fall of tides across the planet. Those motions are real, beautiful, and immensely important, but they are gradual and predictable, unfolding over many hours as Earth rotates beneath the tidal bulges. A tsunami is something else entirely. It begins with sudden displacement, not celestial tugging. That difference matters because the phrase tidal wave tempts people to connect two phenomena that are driven by completely different mechanisms. One comes from orbital gravity acting on the whole ocean in a steady rhythm. The other comes from a shock to the water, often delivered by the solid Earth itself. Once you separate those ideas, the subject becomes clearer and more astonishing. The moon is a master of timing and repetition. Tsunamis belong instead to rupture, collapse, and abrupt release. The main tidal wave has confused generations about the real danger. Names shape instinct. If people hear the phrase tidal wave, they may imagine something linked to the normal rise and fall of the sea, perhaps dramatic, but still somehow familiar. That is exactly the problem. A tsunami is not familiar in that way at all. It is not part of the regular coastal rhythm. It is an emergency born from sudden displacement, often carrying immense energy across long distances or toward nearby shores with terrifying speed. The older phrase lingered because it sounded descriptive and because people historically saw the sea surge inland without understanding the true cause. But the name blurs the mechanism, and blurred mechanisms can lead to blurred responses. Good hazard language matters because it tells people what kind of event they are dealing with. Tsunami is more than a scientific preference. It is a correction. It strips away a misleading association and points us toward the actual physics, urgency, and unpredictability of the danger. One of tsunami science's first lessons is simple. Water remembers force. Push water in one place, and it does not forget immediately. That is one of the most elegant truths at the heart of tsunami science. When a fault ruptures, a slope collapses, or a volcanic mass crashes into the sea, the energy does not vanish at the source. It is transferred into the water, and the water carries that disturbance onward. The ocean becomes a memory in motion. It preserves the imprint of the original force, then expresses it later across distance, depth, and shoreline shape. That is why a brief event on the seafloor can create consequences hours later on a far coast. The water is still responding to the original insult. This idea gives tsunamis a strange, almost haunting coherence. The wave that reaches land is not a separate disaster. It is the continuation of the first one. The sea has taken the force into itself and kept carrying the message until the coast is forced to receive it. The ocean can carry a single shock across whole basins. To stand at one shoreline and be threatened by an event that happened thousands of miles away feels almost unbelievable. Yet that is exactly what a major tsunami can do. A single shock delivered into the water by earthquake, collapse, or impact can spread outward across an entire ocean basin and remain dangerous far from its birthplace. That ability comes from scale. The wave is not a local splash. It is a vast moving disturbance, drawing on the depth and breadth of the basin to keep traveling with remarkable persistence. The ocean, in this sense, becomes a transmission system. It takes one violent input and redistributes its consequences across enormous geography. This is why tsunamis have such a unique emotional power. They connect distant coasts through one shared event. A rupture near one nation can become a threat to many others, all linked by the same moving pulse. Few natural hazards demonstrate planetary connectedness so vividly. Survival often depends on recognizing danger before official confirmation. There is a hard truth at the center of tsunami safety. Waiting for certainty can cost the very time needed to escape. Warning centers, instruments, and official alerts are crucial, but in the first moments after a nearby event, the people in greatest danger may have to act before a formal message reaches them. That is why recognition matters so much. Strong, prolonged shaking near the coast, a fast retreat of the sea, an unusual roar from the shoreline. These signs are not interesting details. They are actionable information. In many of the deadliest events, the difference between survival and loss came down to whether people trusted those signals quickly enough to move. This makes tsunami safety unusually personal. It is not only about what experts know. It is about what ordinary people are prepared to recognize and do under pressure. Sometimes the life-saving decision is made not after confirmation, but in the brave gap before it arrives. The most powerful tsunami defense is knowledge passed on in time. Walls can crack, sensors can fail, forecasts can improve and still arrive too late for someone standing at the shore. But knowledge shared across generations has a different strength. When communities remember what long shaking means, where the safe hills are, how fast to move, and why strange water must never be approached, that memory becomes a form of protection carried inside people rather than outside. Then, it can survive power cuts, broken roads, and the collapse of ordinary systems. That is why the deepest defense against tsunamis is not purely mechanical. It is cultural. It lives in stories, drills, school lessons, signs, family habits, and the decision to take old warnings seriously before the next disaster gives them new meaning. In the end, the most valuable barrier is often not concrete at all. It is memory made practical, passed forward in time until the right person recognizes danger and moves soon enough to live. As our journey draws to a close, we can let the ocean grow still again. Tonight, we followed tidal waves across the world and through time. We traced them from rupturing seafloors and collapsing mountains through deep water where they can pass almost unseen, to the moment they rise at last against the land. We moved through harbors, bays, river mouths, and low coasts. We saw how memory survives in stone markers, ghost forests, buried sand, and stories passed from one generation to the next. And we were reminded that these waves are not only forces of destruction, but also windows into the restless life of the earth itself. There is something humbling in all of that. The sea can appear calm, silver, and endless, while carrying the memory of some distant shift far below the surface. A shoreline can look peaceful beneath the fading light, even though it has been shaped by ancient surges, hidden layers, and warnings written quietly into the land. But for now, you do not need to hold any of it too tightly. Let the images soften. Let the harbors, cliffs, and long coastlines drift gently into the distance. Let your breathing become slow and steady. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the mind grow quieter now, as if the tide itself were gradually drawing back, leaving the shore smooth and still beneath the night sky. And if you enjoyed this journey, you can like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. And if you happen to still be awake, there will be another video waiting for you on screen in just a moment. Until then, rest deeply, sleep well, and good night.